Mr. and Mrs. Priddle Pruddle Paddle Duck had 5 lovely little ducks. That's ducklings to you and me. The first said, "Quack." The second said, "Quack." The third said, "Quack," as loud as you like. The fourth said, "Quack," as quiet as a mouse. But the fifth duck said, "Quick, quick." Quack, 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 quick, quick. "Quick, quick, quick, quick," said Mr. and Mrs. Priddle Pruddle Paddle Duck together. "Oh, what can we do? Oh, what can we say when people ask us about a little duck?" That's a duckling to you and me. A little duckling that says quick instead of quack. Well, what do you know? Who should be there? The farmer a-ploughing his field, and he heard the little duck. That's a duckling to you and me. And the weather was hot, and the ground was hot, and the farmer was hottest of all, and he heard quick, quick, instead of quack. And he thought it was the farmer's wife, a-calling him to get on with his work, and he worked so quick, and he never slacked when he heard that duck say quick and not quack. So his work was all done so very quick, and the wife gave him cake and cold drinks for his tea, for the sake of a quick, not a quack. But the very next day, Mr. and Mrs. Priddle Pruddle Paddle Duck were walking and a-waddling by the side of the road, and the postman went a-cycling by. Said number 1, "Quack." Said number 2, "Quack." "Quack!" shouted number 3 as loud as you like. "Quack!" was whispered as quiet as a mouse by the fourth, who tarried behind, and what do you think number 5 did say? "Quick, quick," as quick as you like. And the postman nearly fell off his bike when he thought that the postmaster was telling him to hurry with his work, and the letters were posted from the pack at his back, and all for the sake of a quick, not a quack. And the postman was home in time for his tea, and a kiss and a cuddle from his wife and his children 3. "Quick, quick, quick," said Mr. and Mrs. Priddle Pruddle Paddle Duck. "Oh, what can we do? Oh, what can we say when people ask us about a little duck?" That's a duckling to you and me. A little duckling that says quick instead of quack. Now, as the silvery moon rose so high in the sky, the policeman was ready to go out for his work, to watch the streets and keep us safe, and walk and look after us all, and down the road came all of the family Priddle Pruddle Paddle Duck. That's Mr. and Mrs. and 5 little ducks. That's ducklings to you and me. And the policeman smiled and saluted as he stopped the traffic to let them cross the road. "Quack," said 1. "Quack," said 2. "Quack!" cried 3. "Quack," whispered 4 as quiet as you like, and 5 said nothing more than, "Quick, quick!" "Quick!" shouted the policeman. "Quick! But where?" And he listened, and he heard a dog bark so loud, and that policeman ran as fast as the wind till he came to the house at the bottom of the hill where old Tom, as old as the hills and beyond, well, he lived there, and there he lay, where he'd fallen. The dog barked, and the dog whined to see that his master was hurt, and the policeman raised old Tom up and got him to hospital, where they made him as right as rain. Now, the dog was the wisest of all of the dogs that you or I would ever meet, and he was called Old Tom's dog. And he ran back to Mr. and Mrs. Priddle Pruddle Paddle Duck, and looked for the little ducks. That's ducklings to you and me. And he said, "Now, where's the cleverest little duckling in the world that has helped me and my master, old Tom?" The first said, "Quack." The second said, "Quack." The third said, "Quack," as loud as you like. The fourth said, "Quack," as quiet as a mouse. But the fifth duck said, quick, quick!" Old Tom's dog said, "My master and I have seen and heard many things, but a little a duckling that can say 'quick, quick' is a very good thing indeed." Now Mr. and Mrs. Priddle, Pruddle, Paddle, Duck were not so glad, as they did not know what to do with a little duckling who said "quick, quick," and not "quack." "Oh, please, old Tom's dog, could you help us? Could you teach our duck to say quack and not quick, quick?" "Of course I can help you, as your little duckling has helped me and my master, old Tom." Now, old Tom's dog taught this duckling to bark as well as he, and bark became quack, and quack became back, and back became quack. And the old dog and duckling, well, they danced and they danced about the farm, and were the best of all friends in all of the world, as they barked and quacked and quacked their way back to Mr. and Mrs. Priddle, Pruddle, Paddle, Duck. They all smiled as number one said, "Quack." The second said, "Quack." The third duck said, "Quack," as loud as you like. The fourth said, "Quack," as quiet as a mouse. And the fifth duckling said, "Quack, quack, 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 quick, quick." Old Tom's dog, how can we ever tell you how grateful we are for helping us?" said Mr. and Mrs. Priddle, Pruddle, Paddle, Duck. Meow. "It was nothing at all," said the old dog, as he lapped at a saucer full of milk. "Meow. It was nothing at all." And old Tom's dog curled up and lay down, and he purred himself to sleep. There were 3 little pigs who lived very well with their mother in a house, but soon the house became so small and the pigs became so big that they couldn't all fit inside, and the mother turned to the 3 little pigs and said, "Now, my 3 little pigs, it's time for you to go out into the world and to go and build some houses for yourself, because this house is not big enough for all of us to live in." And 2 of the pigs were very sad because they were so very lazy, and they didn't like to do any work. And the 3rd pig was the cleverest pig in all of the world, and knew that the mother was right. And the very next morning, their mother waved them goodbye, and they walked along the road, but they didn't know that they were being watched by the big, bad wolf, who lived up in the trees. And he looked at those 3 little pigs, and he licked his lips, and he scratched his chin, and he rubbed his head, and he rubbed his stomach, and he said, "Yum, yum, yum, piggy wiggy for my tum. I like to eat pigs for breakfast and dinner and tea." And the 3 little pigs, well, they walked and they walked until they met an old man. And the old man had on his back a great big bundle of straw, and the old man was hot, 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 hot. And the first pig, who was not a very polite pig, walked up to this man and said, "Man, give me your straw, because I want to make a house." And the old man was quite glad to take the straw from off his back, because he was so hot, hot, hot. And he put the straw down. And the first little pig took one piece of straw and pushed it into the ground, and pushed another piece into the ground, and another, and put straw inside of straw, and soon there was a house with a window and a door and walls and a roof, and that pig looked at the house and said, "Look at my house, and just how strong it is. I like my house, it's the strongest house in all of the world." And the third little pig, who was the cleverest pig in all of the world, said, Your house won't be very strong. There might be a big, bad wolf out there who could huff and puff and blow it down." But the first little pig didn't listen, and went inside of the house and was very pleased. And then there were only two little pigs. And they walked, and they walked, and they walked, and they walked until they met another old man, and on his back he had a great big bundle of sticks. And the second pig said, "Please, man, please can I have your sticks?" And the old man took the sticks from off his back and put them down, and he was glad to put them down because he was hot, hot, hot. And the second little pig, well, he had said please, but he hadn't said thank you, and the old man walked on. And the second little pig pushed a stick into the ground, and another, and another, and another, and another, and put sticks inside of sticks, and soon there was a house there, with a wall and a window and a door and a roof. And the second little pig looked very pleased indeed, and said, "Look at my house, and how strong it is. It's a very strong house." But the third little pig, who was the cleverest pig in all of the world, knew that if the big, bad wolf could see that house, then he could come and blow it down. And now there was only the third little pig, who walked and walked and walked until they met an old man who was pushing a great barrow load of bricks, and he was hot, 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 hot. And the third little pig, who was as polite as they were clever, said, "Please, man, please can I have some of your bricks? I'll be very grateful. Oh, please, would that be all right? Thank you very much." And the old man smiled to see such a pig that was so polite and kind, and he poured some bricks out by the side of the road, and the pig was so grateful that, well, there was a supper cooked for the old man, and some drink given to the old man, and the old man smiled as he went on his way, and the third little pig, who was the cleverest pig in all of this world, took one brick and another brick and some cement, and put it on top of the bricks and more cement, and made a house that was as strong as ever a house could be. But up in the woods there was the big, bad wolf. And he licked his lips, and he scratched his chin, and he scratched at his head, and he rubbed his stomach, and he said, "Yummy, yum, yum, piggy wiggy for my Tom. I like to eat piggies for breakfast and dinner and tea." And he came down from the woods, and he went to the house that was made out of straw, and he rat-a-tat-tatted on the door, and said, little pig, oh, let me come in." And the little pig said, "No, no, no, I won't let you in, not by the hairs of my chinny chin." "In that case," said the big, bad wolf, "I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." And he took a big, deep breath. And he huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down. And the little pig jumped up with its wiggly curly tail behind him, and he ran, and he ran, and he ran, and he ran, till he came to the house that was made out of sticks, and he rat-a-tat-tatted on the door, and the door closed with a great big crash behind him, and the wolf followed behind, and he was cross. But he pretended not to be, and he rat-a-tat-tatted on the door and said, little pigs, let me come in." And the two pigs inside of the house said, "No, we won't let you in, not by the hairs on our chinny-chin-chin." "If you don't let me in," said the big bad wolf, "I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down." "I don't think you can," said the pig whose house was made out of sticks. "My house is very strong." But the big bad wolf, well, he took a big deep breath, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down. And the two little pigs, well, they jumped up with their curly, wiggly tails behind them, and they ran till they came to the house that was made out of bricks, and the door slammed behind them. And they just got in time. And the big, bad wolf, he was cross, but he pretended not to be, and he said, little pigs, let me come in." And the three little pigs said, No, we won't let you in, not by the hairs on our chinny-chin-chin." "And if you don't let me in," said the big bad wolf, "then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." Now the third little pig, who was the cleverest pig in all of this world, said, "Oh, wolf, I don't think that you can blow the house down, because it is so very strong." But the big bad wolf, he took a big deep breath, and he huffed, and he puffed, 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 until he felt as if he could huff and puff no more. And the three little pigs, well, they danced, and they danced, and they danced around the room, and then they heard a scrit, and a scratch, and a scritch, and a scrat, and a scratch, and a scritch, and the third little pig said, "Quick, we'd better go and make a fire." And they made a fire right there in the fireplace. And they heard a scrit and a scratch and a scratch and a scrit and a scrit and a scrit and a scratch. And the third little pig said, "Quick, I think that's the big bad wolf, and he's climbing on top of the roof." And they went and they got a great big pan of water, and they put it on top of the fire. And they heard scrit, scrat, scrit, scrat, scrit, scrat, scrit, scrat, scritch. And it was that big bad wolf who was climbing right down the chimney, and his tail went into all of that hot water, and the wolf screamed, "Ow!" And he picked up his tail and he tucked it in his belt, and he scratched and he scratched all the way down, and his toe went into the hot water, and he screamed, "Ow!" And his foot went into the water, and the big bad wolf screamed, "Ah!" And he couldn't stand it anymore, and he scratched and he scratched all the way up the chimney, and he scratched and he scratched all across the roof, and he went down the wall, and he ran and he ran and he ran and he ran, and he never ever came back to that place again. Now the third pig, who was the cleverest pig in all of this world, said to his brothers, "I don't think that there's enough room in my house for all three of us. I think that you need to go and make a good strong house." And I don't think that they made their houses out of straw. And I don't think that they made their houses out of sticks. And I'm not really sure. But between you and me, I think that they might have made their houses out of bricks. Now once, there was an old man, and there was an old woman, and they lived in a house, and they could have lived very well, but each and every day the old man and the old woman would shout and scream and bawl and holler at each other, and they had in this world nothing more than one cow and one sheep. And the old man would say, "It's your turn to go and look after the cow," and the old woman would say, "No, it's always me who does the work. It's your turn." And the old man would say no, and she would say yes, no, and yes, and yes, and no. And each and every day they would shout and scream and bawl and howl and holler, and the cow never got milked, and they had no milk to sell, nor cheese to make. And the very next morning, the man would say, "It's your turn to go and look after the sheep." And the old woman would say, "No, it's your turn. I have to do everything here. It's your turn. You should go and look after the sheep." And the old man would say, "No." And she would say yes, and yes, and no, and no, and yes. And they would shout and scream and bawl and holler, and the sheep would never be looked after. And so it went on, and things never got so very good for that old man and that old woman. And then one day, the old woman said to the old man, "I want you to go out and get us something to eat." And the old man said, "Yes." And the old woman, she couldn't believe her ears or her eyes. And the old man got out of bed and got himself dressed, and he walked outside, and he walked to where he knew there were some potatoes and carrots. And just as he was pulling some potatoes from out of the ground, he heard a voice, and the voice was screaming, "Help! Please help me, I'm stuck!" And the old man looked all around, and he could see no one around, and all he could hear was the voice, and it shouted again, "Help me!" And he looked all around, and he walked to the trees, and again the voice shouted out, "Help me! I'm stuck here!" And the old man looked, and there, behind an old oak tree, well, what should he see but a great big pool of mud. And in the mud there was a coach, no bigger than your knee, and there it was, stuck in the mud, and it was made out of gold and covered with silver, and it was being pulled by 4 dogs, 4 big black dogs, and there it was, with its 1, 2, 3, 4 golden wheels stuck inside of the mud. And the old man went over and he looked inside, and there was a woman with a crown on her head and a golden dress, and she was covered all over in diamonds, and she had silver boots all on her feet. And the old man looked, and she was just about to shout again, and he said, "I'll help you to get out of the mud. I see that you're stuck here." Now the old man pushed, and the dogs, they pulled, and he pushed, and the dogs pulled, and pushing and pulling, well, the coach came out of the mud, but the old man fell down right there into the mud, and he was covered with mud from the top of his head to the tips of his toes, with mud in his shoes, and mud on his trousers, and mud in his shirt, and mud all over his hair. And the woman stepped out of the carriage and she said, thank you, you've really helped me. I was stuck there right inside of the mud and you've helped me. Now you are a mortal man and you have helped me, and I am a fairy princess, and I must, by law, give you 1 and 2 and 3 magic wishes. Now, do you have lots of gold? And the old man laughed. Do I look as if I've got lots of gold? And she said, do you have lots of cows and sheep? And the old man laughed and said, do I look as if I have lots of cows and sheep? And she said, do you have a wife? And he said, oh yes, I have a wife, but we always shout and scream and bawl and howl and holler. And she said, you must think well about the 1, 2, 3 wishes that I'm going to give to you. No, I'm going to give them to your wife, and you must go back as quick as you can to see what it is that she will wish for. And now I will say thank you. And the old man, well, he didn't take a second telling, because he just jumped up, and he upped, and he offed, and he out, and he went, and he ran as fast as he could. And when he looked over his shoulder, sure enough, that coach, that was no taller than your knee, well, it had disappeared, and so had the 4 dogs, and that fairy princess was gone. And when he came back into his house, he said to his wife, you'll never guess what's happened to me. When I was out, I met with a fairy princess, and she's given you 1, 2, 3 magic wishes. And his wife said, I don't believe you. I don't believe that these things have happened. You just didn't want to bring anything in for me to eat. You said you would, and you've come back empty-handed. But her husband said, it did really happen. It really happened. Look at me, I'm covered in mud. And she's given you 1 and 2 and 3 magic wishes. You could wish for gold, and you could wish for silver, and you could wish for diamonds and all sorts of things, and cows and sheep. And the old woman said, oh, really? I'll tell you what I'll wish for. I wish, and there was a rushing sound. I wish, and there was a clattering sound. I wish that there was a fire. A fire in the fireplace, and on top of the fire there was a frying pan, and in the frying pan there was the biggest sausage in all of the world. And there was a rushing sound. And there was a clattering sound, and there was a great big crash, and down the chimney there came a fire, and after the fire there came a frying pan, and right inside of the frying pan there was a huge sausage. And the old man looked, and he started to smile, and he started to dance, and the old woman couldn't believe her eyes, and the old man danced and danced and danced and danced, and he danced right beside the fire, and he danced, and he knocked over the frying pan, and the sausage fell right into the fire and the flames and the fire. And the old woman said, you silly man, you're always dancing around the house. Now look what you've gone and done. You've gone and knocked that sausage right into the fire. Oh, I wish. Oh, I wish. I wish that that sausage was right on the end of your nose. But as soon as she'd said it, she wished that she hadn't, because there was a rushing sound, and there was a clattering sound, and there was a great big crash. And the sausage coiled right out of the fire, and it crept across the floor, and it slid up the old man's trousers and across his shirt, and it went and it stuck itself right on the end of his nose, and the old man shouted, oh, look what you've gone and done. You've gone and given me a sausage for a nose. And he was dancing still around the room, and he stamped on the sausage and he screamed, oh, that hurts, now my nose is a sausage. And the old woman walked over to the old man, and she grabbed hold of the end of that sausage, and she pulled, and the old man screamed, oh, and she pulled, and the old man screamed louder, oh. And she pulled, and the old man screamed, and he yelled, and he shouted, "Oh, stop, you can't pull it off." And the old woman went, and she got a knife, and she got a fork, and she started to walk towards him, and he shouted, "Stop! You can't do that! You can't do that! Please don't do that!" And she sat down and she looked at the old man with a sausage for a nose. And he said, "You'll have to use the last wish to wish for the sausage off the end of my nose." And the old woman said, "No, I can still wish for gold, and I can still wish for silver. I can still wish for diamonds and cows and sheep and a beautiful house. You just have to stay inside of the house." And the old man said, "No, I can't do that." And she sat down beside him and she looked at him and she tried not to. But when he had a sausage for a nose, the corners of her mouth, well, they started to creep up. And she started to smile. And she started to laugh when she looked at him, because he did look so very funny with a sausage for a nose. And she said, Oh, all right, I will wish for the last wish, to wish for the sausage to come off your nose." And she said, I wish that the sausage would come off the old man's nose." And there was a rushing sound, and there was a clattering sound, and there was a great big crash. And the sausage came off the old man's nose, and it curled and it coiled itself right up on top of a plate on top of the table. And she got her knife and she got her fork, and she cut some off and put it on her plate. And she cut some off and put it on the old man's plate. And just as she was about to put some inside of her mouth, the corners of her mouth crept up, and the grin became a smile, and the smile became a laugh. And she laughed and she laughed and she laughed, and the old man tried not to, but his lips, they started to creep up, and he had a grin, and then he laughed, and the two of them sat there laughing and laughing, to think that all they'd got for their 3 magic wishes was sausage for their supper. And the very next day, well, the old man, he said to the old woman, I need some help to go and look after the cow." And the old woman said, "Yes, I'll come and help you." And he couldn't believe his eyes, and he couldn't believe his ears, but the two of them walked outside, and they milked that cow, and people gave them money for that beautiful creamy milk. And soon they had enough gold to buy a second cow, and enough gold and silver to buy some more sheep. And it wasn't long before they had not 1 or 3, but 5 cows, and not 2 or 4, but 10 sheep. And they lived very well, and they lived very happily, and from that day they helped each other with everything that they did. There was once a boy who didn't know what it was to be scared, and he didn't know the sight or sound or smell of fear in his heart. But nobody believed him. In fact, they would test him and try him and make him stand at the top of the tallest tree and dance amongst the branches. And when he came down, they would say, "Well, did you find fear? Did you know what it was to be scared?" And the boy said, "No, I did not. I did not find fear at the top of the tree. All I saw was how tall it was, and you lied to me." Well, they couldn't believe him. And with time, the boy grew tired of being tested and tried, and he took all of the things that he would need for his journey, and he packed them in a cloth, and he put a stick at his back, and he walked and he waved away from his mother, and he went out in search of fear. And everywhere he went, no one would believe that he didn't know the sound or sight or smell of fear, and they too would try him. And still he would not find fear. And then, one night, as the snow fell and the moon rose, he saw a fire on the side of a mountain. And as he got close, he could see that the fire was surrounded by men who looked rough and ready and hale and hearty, and they had swords in their hands and pistols in their belts. And do you think the boy felt scared? Well, no, he did not. And he just pushed his way through to get to the fire, for the boy was cold. And he stood there warming himself by the side of their fire, and, well, each and every one of them gasped. Because no one had ever been to that place before. Not even an army of men would have dared to have gone to stand by the side of that fire. And here was a boy, and the boy looked around at their faces. And do you think he felt scared? No, he did not. And there was a chair, a huge chair that was made right out of gold and silver and covered in diamonds, and it was the robber king's throne, for that's who these men were, with their swords and their pistols. And the boy went and sat in the robber king's throne, and each and every one of the men gasped, because they would not have dared to have done anything so bold. And then the king of all of the robbers came back, and he looked at the boy and he said, "You boy!" He says, "What do you think you're doing sitting in my throne?" And the boy looked and said, "I was cold, and I was tired, and I needed a rest somewhere." Now, nobody had ever spoken to the robber king in this way, and he quite liked this boy who spoke to him, and nobody had spoken to him in this way, even if they'd had a belly full of wine. And here he was, as bold as you like. And he asked the boy why he was there, and the boy told him that he didn't know what fear was in the robber king. Well, he said, "Oh, if you want to find fear, that's a very easy thing. Don't you feel scared when you look at me and look at all of my men?" "Indeed I do not," said the boy. "I do not feel scared. All I see is you and your men, and I don't feel scared at all." "Well, boy, if you want to find fear, then go and make me a pie." "A pie?" said the boy. "How is a pie going to make me feel scared?" And the robber king said, "Oh, go and make this pie in the middle of the graveyard." Well, the boy, he didn't feel scared at all, and he picked up a pot of fire and a pan with meat and vegetables and flour and water and all the things that he would need to make a pie, and he walked down the side of the mountain that was covered in snow till he came to the graveyard, and there on a big flat gravestone he started to cook that pie, and at the very tick and the very tock of midnight the pie was ready. But a voice from behind a tree called out, "Is that pie for me?" And a boy said, "No, it is not. I don't make pies for anyone except the robber king, and I don't know who you are." And do you think he felt scared? No, he did not. And then a hand, an old hand, a gnarled hand, well, it crept from behind a tree and reached towards that pie, and the boy just took his spoon and he whacked it as hard as he could and said, "I've told you once already, I do not make pies for strangers, and this pie is not for you." And he picked up the pie, and he picked up the pot, and he picked up the pan, and he walked back up the side of that mountain to where all of the robbers stood. And when he came back, each and every one of them gasped, because they'd all been asked to do that thing, to make that pie. And the voice had scared some of them, but the hand had scared all of them, and none of them had ever come back with a pie. And the king of the robbers smiled and said, "Boy, did you not find fear?" "Indeed I did not," said the boy, "and you lied to me. You said I would find fear, and I did not. All I heard was a voice, and all I heard and saw was a hand." Then one of the men but the largest of all of the sorts, said, "Boy, if you want to find fear, then go down to the bottom of the mountain where there is the pool of sorrow, and there you'll find fear." And all of the men agreed, and the boy just stood there and said, "Well, indeed I do, I hope I do, because you'll have lied to me twice if I don't find fear." And off he went, without a bye or a leave, and he walked right down that mountainside till he came to a great pool, and by the side of the pool there was a tree, and on the tree there was a branch, and on the branch there was a swing, and on the swing there was a baby, and the baby was crying, full fit to burst, and tears were streaming down its cheeks and running off its chin and falling down into a great big pool of tears that was there beside the tree. And the boy looked and said, "This is a very strange place indeed, where they leave children on swings, on branches, on trees, by the side of pools of water." And he tried to reach up to bring the baby down, but he couldn't. And then, from right out of the middle of the water, there came a woman, a beautiful woman. And she said, "Oh, please, kind sir, please help me. My little baby brother is caught on the swing, on the branch, on the tree, and I can't reach to get him down. Please climb up the tree and bring him down for me." And the boy went and he tried to climb, but he couldn't reach the swing. And when he came down, the woman said, "Oh, please come and stand in this pool so that I will be able to climb on your back, and maybe then I can reach to bring down my baby brother." Well, the boy just walked straight into the water. And did he feel scared? No, he did not. And he walked into the water, and the woman climbed on his back, and she reached up. But she said, "It's not high enough. I need to stand on your shoulders. Please, lay down in the water so I can stand on your shoulders. And then when you stand, I'll be able to reach my baby brother." Well, the boy just bent down, and he was covered all over in all of those tears. And the woman, she put one foot on one shoulder and another foot on the other, and when he straightened up, she reached up, and as she reached up, she weighed him down, and she became heavier and pushed him right into the water, and he sank lower down, and he said, "Oh, woman, please, I am starting to sink in the water." Was he scared? No, he was not. And as she reached higher and higher, she became heavier until the water was up to his chin. And he said, "Woman, you must stand at the side, and we must try another way to reach your baby brother." But she didn't listen to him, and the water came up to his nose, and he grabbed hold of her ankles and legs and placed her upon the dry land. But as soon as she reached the dry land, she disappeared. And so did the pool of tears, and so did the tree, and the branch, and the swing, and the baby, and the boy. He stood there and said, "This is a strange place indeed." And was he scared? No, he was not. And he walked towards the town. And when he got to the town, he saw an old man dressed in fine clothes. And the old man was crying, full fit to burst. And the boy asked and said, "Why are you crying, old man?" But the old man just sobbed and howled. And as he walked closer towards the centre of the town, he met an old woman, and she too was crying. And when he asked her, all she would do was cry. And then he saw that they all walked towards the middle of the town. And everyone stood there, and they looked up towards the castle. And in the castle there was a window, and in the window there was a man, and in his hands he had a bird, a white bird with a golden beak. And the boy saw a girl standing right beside the boy. And he said to her, "Why is everyone crying, and why are they all looking up towards that window?" And the girl said, "Oh, our king is dead. And now we must choose a new king or queen. And the man stands there to throw the bird out, and whomsoever it lands on, well, they will become the new king or queen." Now, some people wanted to be king or queen, and they raised their shoulders, and others did not want to become the queen or king, and they cowered back. And that man at the window, he took that white bird and he flung it out into the air, and it flew once and twice and 3 times above all of the people. And some raised their shoulders and some pulled back, and the boy just stood there and looked, and that bird hovered right above the boy, and it landed on his shoulder. And then he felt something inside of his heart that he'd never felt in all of his life, because everyone who stood there turned and looked at this boy. He felt scared. He felt fear inside of his heart, because he knew if he was to be the king, then he would have to look after each and every one of all of these people who stood there, and he didn't know if he was strong enough. He didn't know if he was clever enough, and he started to cry. And the man who had thrown the bird out above the crowd, he came down and he said, "Boy, why are you crying?" And the boy said that it was because he was scared, that he didn't think you would be strong enough or clever enough to be the king. And that man, well, he smiled and he said, "Oh, that is a good answer, boy. If you didn't know what fear was, then you could never become a king. And you will become a good king. And you will need each and every one of these people here to help you. And sometimes you will fail, and sometimes things will not go as you will plan. But you will be good and strong." And the boy became a prince. And the prince became a man and became a king. And he was the best king that ever lived in all of that land.